My name is Lily Wilson. I'm the last shaman from the north. The day I was welcomed back into my wealthy birth family, the fake heiress, Celeste, accidentally smashed our grandmother's favorite antique jade Buddha and tearfully claimed I had pushed her. My parents demanded I apologize. I laughed. A shaman's head does not bow easily. Are you sure she can handle it if I do? They accused me of putting on an act. My brother even kicked me. Just do what you're told. Fine. I turned to Celeste and bowed respectfully 3 times. On the first bow, her face flushed, her temperature soaring to 102 degrees. On the second bow, the slender fingers she was so proud of began to wither, the tendons contracting. She would never play the piano again. Before I could complete the third bow, my parents were on their knees, crying and begging me. Master, we were wrong. Please call off your powers. My guardian spirit scoffed. A voice echoed in my head. Kiddo, tell them there's no calling it off. This is karma. My name is Lily Wilson, the last shaman from the north. Right now, I was watching the chaos unfolding in the living room with a blank expression. My so-called parents, Richard and Helen Wilson, were kneeling on either side of me, their faces masks of unconcealed shock and terror. Celeste! Helen screamed, scrambling toward her. Richard and my brother, Brandon, finally snapped out of their daze and clumsily lifted Celeste, rushing for the door. Hurry! To the hospital. Now, in my mind, an old but powerful voice was chattering away. Serves them right. Kiddo, you remember this. We shamans hold our heads high. We repay kindness with kindness and slights with vengeance, no exceptions. Don't go soft on this heartless bunch. This was my guardian spirit, the great fox spirit. He was a 1,000-year-old fox, hot-tempered and fiercely protective of me. I tried to soothe him with my thoughts. Elder, please calm down. A lesson is enough. We don't need to take a life. Bullshit. Not taking a life is letting them off easy. The old fox snorted, his tone dripping with contempt. Especially that little brat who kicked you. I've got his number. From now on, I'll make sure he steps in dog crap every day and chokes on water. A warmth spread through my chest. In this entire world, the only one who truly cared for me was this invisible, intangible old spirit. About 2 hours later, Richard and Helen returned from the hospital, dragging their exhausted bodies. Brandon followed behind them, his face paler than the wallpaper. The way they looked at me had completely changed. The initial disdain and impatience had morphed into fear and panic. The atmosphere in the living room was suffocating. Finally, it was Helen who spoke first. Her eyes were red and puffy, tears still staining her cheeks. She tried to force a gentle smile, but it looked worse than crying. Lily, she called out tentatively, her voice trembling. Why don't you come sit down? I didn't move. I just stared at her coldly. Helen's smile froze. She took a deep breath, and fresh tears welled up as she started to play the sympathy card. Lily, it was my fault. I'm so sorry, we didn't know you were. She seemed to be searching for the right words. We shouldn't have treated you that way. But Celeste, she's been with us for 20 years. Even if she's not our biological daughter, we raised her. The doctors say she's in bad shape. Her fever is almost 104, and no medicine is working. The nerves in her fingers are rapidly atrophying, and they can't find a cause. Lily, I'm begging you, please save her. Please. As she spoke, she started to kneel again. I took a step back, avoiding her. It's not an illness, I said, my voice flat. It's a consequence. She planted the seed, and now she has to taste the fruit. Richard's patience was clearly thinner than Helen's. He stepped forward, his eyes stern, but his voice lost its edge when he spoke. What is it you want? He pulled a checkbook and a gold pen from his suit pocket, scribbled down a series of numbers, tore out the check, and held it out to me. Name your price. Is $1 million enough? If you cure Celeste, the money is yours. If it's not enough, you can ask for more. He thought money could solve everything, as if he were paying off some street corner fortune teller. I looked at the flimsy piece of paper and laughed. Mr. Wilson, do you really think money can buy a life? Can it buy off karma? Richard's face turned grim. Beside him, Brandon finally lost his cool. He pointed a finger at me, his voice a weak attempt at a roar. Lily Wilson, Don't push it. You think you're the only one who knows this kind of hocus pocus? I'll find a real master. Someone way more powerful than you. You'll be sorry then. His words were tough, but the slight tremor in his hand and his shifty eyes betrayed his fear. I wasn't scared. In fact, I found it almost amusing. Go ahead, I said, looking up at him, my gaze calm and steady. Go find whoever you want. I'd love to see whether your master is more powerful than the spirit standing behind me. My voice was quiet, but it was like a bucket of ice water dumped over Brandon's head. The color drained from his face. His lips moved, but in the end he didn't dare say another word. An unprecedented wave of fear and helplessness washed over the Wilson family. They were finally realizing that the biological daughter they'd brought back from the countryside wasn't some pushover they could easily control. I wasn't here for a family reunion. I was here to collect a debt. Brandon was a man of action, or rather, my casual remark had driven him to the edge, and he desperately needed to find someone who could put me in my place to salvage his pathetic pride. The next afternoon, he brought home a so-called feng shui master. The man was in his 50s, with a goatee and an ill-fitting silk suit. He held a Luopan compass and started shaking his head and muttering sagely the moment he walked in. This house is filled with resentment and malevolent energy. There must be an evil presence at work here. Hearing this, Brandon acted as if he'd found his savior. He immediately pointed at me and said, "Master, it's her. She's the demon. Get rid of her." The master turned his beady, cunning eyes toward me, about to say something. But in the next second, the expression on his face froze. I could clearly feel the great fox spirit unleashing his power. It was an ancient, murderous demonic energy cultivated over 1,000 years. A normal person might not feel it, but for a half-baked practitioner like this guy, it was like having a mountain dropped on him. Sweat instantly beaded on the master's forehead, and his legs began to shake uncontrollably. The needle on his compass spun wildly before the whole thing cracked with a sharp snap. A spirit," the master stammered, his face ashen. He looked at me with pure terror, as if he'd seen something utterly horrifying. There's a powerful spirit protecting this place. Mortals should not interfere. I must take my leave. I'm leaving." He didn't even finish his sentence before he was scrambling out the door on all fours, tumbling and crawling as if a ghost were chasing him. Brandon was completely dumbfounded. He stared at the master's disappearing back, then slowly turned to look at me, as if seeing me for the first time. I didn't even bother to spare him a glance. Humph, what a useless little hack, trying to show off in front of me. The old fox's voice echoed in my mind, full of disdain. From that day on, Brandon's karmic retribution officially began. The old fox was true to his word. Brandon really did start stepping in dog crap every day. Day 1, he wore a pair of shiny custom-made leather shoes to work and stepped right into a fresh pile on the community lawn. Day 2, he made a point to walk around the lawn, only to be chased by an off-leash poodle. In his panic, he stumbled right into another pile in a flower bed. Day 3, he had the driver pull the car right up to the villa's front door, determined not to take a single step. As a result, a stray cat jumped down from the wall, and whatever was on its paws flicked off and landed squarely on his pant leg. Besides the dog crap, he started choking on water, gagging on his food, and tripping over his own feet on flat ground, landing face first. What truly broke him was when he was about to sign a multi-million-dollar deal he'd been working on for 6 months. In the final moments, in front of the other company's executives, he managed to step in dog crap again. The other company's CEO suddenly called off the deal, saying Brandon had a dark aura and reeked of bad luck, and he was worried it would affect his company's fortune. Brandon was on the verge of a mental breakdown. At night, he found no peace either. He began having nightmares every night. In his dreams, a white fox as big as a mountain, with 9 tails blotting out the sky, would stare at him with cold, golden eyes and ask him the same question over and over. "How will you pay for that kick?" The immense fear would jolt him awake, drenched in a cold sweat. After a week of this, Brandon was visibly haggard. His eyes were sunken, dark circles hung beneath them, and all of his former arrogance was gone. He was terrified. He started trying to butter me up. For example, The meals the servants brought me would mysteriously contain expensive supplements like bird's nest and fish maw, which he had ordered the kitchen to add. I neither accepted nor refused. I left the items he sent untouched, letting them spoil. I didn't eat a single bite of the supplemented food. I knew he was begging for mercy, but his pathetic pride wouldn't let him actually say the words, "I'm sorry." While Brandon was being tormented by the old fox, I was sorting through our grandmother's belongings. Grandma was the only person in this family from whom I had felt even a glimmer of warmth. Unfortunately, she had passed away from a sudden heart attack a month before I was brought back. They said Grandma doted on Celeste the most, even giving her the antique jade Buddha she cherished. Thinking about it now, it was a joke. Grandma's room was still just as she had left it, clean and tidy, with a faint scent of sandalwood in the air. Deep inside her closet, I found a locked rosewood box. It wasn't large, but it was exquisitely carved with intricate cloud patterns. The moment I took the box out, Helen burst in, as if she had been waiting outside the door. "What are you doing? Who said you could touch her things?" she shrieked, reaching out to grab it. Richard rushed in at the sound of her voice and his eyes narrowed when he saw the box in my hands. "Lily, give the box to your father," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I clutched the box to my chest and looked at them coldly. "This contains what Grandma left for me." "Nonsense!" Helen screamed. "Mom loved Celeste the most. Why would she leave anything for you, eh?" She trailed off, but everyone understood what she meant. Brandon limped over, his expression complicated as he stared at the box. The three of them surrounded me, ready to take it by force if I didn't cooperate. I didn't waste words on them. I simply took a small, tarnished brass key from around my neck. I had worn it my whole life. Grandma had sent it to me in the countryside when I was very young, saying it was part of my destiny and I must never take it off. I inserted the key into the lock and gave it a gentle turn. Click. With a soft, crisp sound, the lock opened. Richard and Helen were stunned. They had tried to open this box before, even hiring the best locksmiths in the city, but none had succeeded. They never imagined that I had the key all along. Ignoring their shocked expressions, I slowly opened the lid. Inside, there were no gold bars, jewels, or property deeds like they had imagined. There was only a thick, yellowed journal and a letter in a manila envelope. On the envelope, in my grandmother's elegant handwriting, were 4 words, "For my granddaughter Lily." My heart lurched. I picked up the letter and opened it in front of them. "My dearest granddaughter Lily, when you read this letter, I may already be gone. Please do not be sad. Life and death are a natural part of being human. Grandma is so sorry. I let you suffer out in the world for 20 years. The truth is, I suspected you had been switched at birth long ago. In the first few days after you were born, I held you constantly. I clearly remember you had a small, plum blossom-shaped birthmark on your left shoulder blade. But a week later, the baby we brought home from the hospital was perfectly clear, with nothing there. I asked your mother about it, but she just said my old eyes were playing tricks on me. After that, no one in the family ever mentioned it again. But I knew. I wasn't mistaken. All these years, I never gave up looking for you. I secretly traveled to the north many times, asking about every girl born on the same day as you. Heaven rewards the persistent, and I finally found news of you in a remote mountain village. I learned of your existence, your hardships, and your true identity. Grandma is so proud of you, and my heart aches for you. The jade Buddha was a protective amulet I sought for you from the great northern mountains. I had a high monk consecrate it and infuse it with spiritual energy, hoping it would keep you safe. Grandma wishes you a life of peace and joy. With love, your grandma." The letter slipped from my fingers. My eyes instantly turned red. So there was someone in this family who had truly loved me. The statue Celeste had shattered wasn't just some priceless antique. It was a protective amulet my grandmother had poured her heart into getting for me. It was my only shield in this world. Celeste didn't just break an amulet. She broke the Wilson family's last chance. I looked up at the dumbfounded Richard and Helen, and slammed the journal down in front of them. See for yourselves. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Celeste was in the throes of a final, desperate frenzy. The intense pain in her body and the fear that her fingers would be permanently crippled had made her lose all reason. But she still refused to admit her fault, instead directing all her hatred toward me. She contacted her best friend, a minor influencer, and had her spread rumors about me online. Soon, an article titled "Shocking Rich Family Secret. Real Heiress is a country charlatan who cursed the sister who raised her for 20 years" started trending on all social media platforms. The post painted me as a manipulative, jealous country bumpkin who used vicious black magic to harm the beloved fake heiress out of resentment. It included high-definition photos of Celeste lying in a hospital bed with her twisted fingers, along with her best friend's tearful accusations. Public opinion exploded. Countless clueless netizens flooded the comments section, hurling the most vicious curses at me. That's terrifying. This person should be arrested. My heart goes out to Celeste. This is a real-life story of the farmer and the snake. Superstition is poison. This needs to be investigated. Lying in her hospital bed, Celeste read the hateful comments with a sick, triumphant smile. She thought this would destroy me. However, she had no idea that some things are not to be trifled with. She's courting death. The old fox's voice was as cold as ice. She dares to slander my disciple? I'll show her what real black magic is. Less than half an hour after the post went live, as Celeste was scrolling through the hate comments, a gut-wrenching pain shot through her fingers, far more intense than anything before. She let out a blood-curdling scream, and her phone clattered to the floor. She looked down and saw that her 10 fingers, which had only been shriveled before, were now turning black, joint by joint. They looked like charred twigs, emitting a sinister aura. "Aya, my hands! My hands!" Her shrill screams echoed through the entire VIP ward. At the same time, her best friend, who was at home gloating over her masterpiece, met with a catastrophe of her own. Her computer screen suddenly went black. Then, countless private photos and chat logs began to scroll down the screen like a waterfall, automatically syncing to all of her social media accounts. The photos were obscene. The chat logs were filled with evidence of her backstabbing friends, seducing sponsors, and her history of plastic surgery. In just a few minutes, the innocent influencer persona she had so carefully crafted completely collapsed. The comment section instantly flipped. The fans who had been cheering her on just moments before now turned on her, tearing her to shreds. Her social life was over so fast, she didn't even have time to react. Celeste had a complete mental breakdown. The physical agony, the failure of her plan, and the terror of the unknown crushed her spirit like 3 great mountains. She started shouting and screaming in her hospital room, completely unhinged, exposing the deepest, darkest parts of herself that she had always kept hidden. Why? Why did she have to come back? I'm the young lady of the Wilson family. Mom and Dad are mine. My brother is mine. I hate her. I'm jealous of her. I'm afraid she'll take everything from me. I broke that jade Buddha on purpose. I wanted to make her miserable. She should die. She should have just died in that poor, remote village. Her hysterical rant was heard loud and clear by Richard and Helen, who had just arrived to visit her. They had just finished reading Grandma's journal, their hearts filled with guilt toward me and a complex mix of emotions toward Celeste. Then they heard her venomous confession. The couple stood frozen at the door of the hospital room, their faces pale and their bodies cold. They looked at the snarling, contorted face on the hospital bed. No longer the gentle, kind daughter they remembered. The last shred of pity and affection in their eyes finally shattered. What kind of monster had they raised for 20 years? Helen couldn't handle the blow. Her vision went dark, and she fainted. Richard caught his wife, looking as if he had aged 20 years in an instant. His back stooped. They finally understood that the root of all this was Celeste. And they finally understood that their family was on the verge of collapse. That night, Richard and Helen returned to the villa. They looked at me, sitting calmly on the sofa and sipping tea, their faces etched with an unprecedented sense of defeat and despair. Helen's eyes were swollen from crying. She looked at me, her lips moving for a long time before she managed to croak out, "Lily, we read the journal, and we heard what Celeste said at the hospital." Her voice was thick with pain and remorse. It's our fault. We failed you, and we failed Mom. We chose the wrong person, and we raised an ungrateful viper." Richard stood beside her. This powerful man who now lacked the courage to even look me in the eye. He bowed his head, his voice hoarse. The company is in trouble. Several major projects were cancelled at the same time. The stock has hit its limit down, and the banks are calling in our loans. The Wilsons might not make it. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot with the desperation of a man with no way out. Lily, I know we have no right to ask you for anything. But this family is your heritage. You can't just stand by and watch it fall. If you're willing to step in and save us, from now on, you will be the only young lady of this family. Everything the Wilsons have will be yours. Their words were full of guilt, but also self-interest. They wanted me to save their crumbling empire. Yet their words still held a flicker of attachment to Celeste that they couldn't let go of. I listened quietly, feeling nothing. 20 years of a misplaced life, 20 years of neglect and pain. None of it could be erased by a few empty apologies and a belated offer of compensation. I set down my teacup, stood up, and looked at them. Your family and your Celeste have nothing to do with me. My voice was soft, but it was a sharp blade that completely severed their last sliver of hope. I turned and walked back to the living room sofa, sitting down with a casual air, as if the impending collapse of the Wilson family they spoke of was just a business story I'd read in the news. Well done, kiddo. The old fox's voice cheered in my mind. That's how you show them. Our pride is ironclad. If they want to beg us, they have to learn how to do it properly. I ignored his cheerleading and poured myself a glass of warm water. My refusal struck Richard and Helen like a bolt of lightning, leaving them frozen in place. They had probably never imagined that their humbled plea would be rejected so bluntly. In the days that followed, the sky truly did fall for the Wilson family. First, the prized arowana fish that Richard had proudly imported from Southeast Asia all went belly up overnight, their deaths grotesque. Next, the century-old oak tree in the yard, which was said to protect the house and bring wealth, split in half and came crashing down on a windless, rainless night, destroying half the garage. Richard's phone rang almost 24 hours a day. Whenever I came out of my room, I'd see him pacing anxiously in the living room. The once dashing business tycoon now had graying temples, his voice thick with a fatigue and panic he could no longer hide. Mr. Lee, just give me one more chance. I can solve the funding issue. Hello. Hello. Director Miller, we've been partners for so many years. Can't we discuss the loan terms just a little more? What? Terminate the contract? Mr. Thompson, we already signed it. Every call ended with a cold, merciless dial tone. The business partners who used to call him a brother now avoided him like the plague. On the financial news channel, an anchor was reporting in a monotone voice. Wilson Group's stock has hit its limit down for 3 consecutive days, with market capitalization evaporating by nearly $10 billion. The market outlook remains pessimistic. The atmosphere at home grew stranger by the day. Helen's spirit completely broke. She stopped dressing up and spent her days in her pajamas, sitting on the sofa with a vacant stare, muttering over and over, "It's karma, it's all karma, Mom is angry with us." Brandon was a complete wreck. The old fox's punishment continued. He was too afraid to leave the house, locking himself in his room, but he couldn't escape the nightmares. I would sometimes hear muffled sobs and screams coming from behind his door. They started getting desperate. Richard somehow managed to hire an old Taoist priest, supposedly from a famed spiritual center in Sedona. The priest had an ethereal air about him. He frowned the moment he entered, spun his compass for a long time, and finally said to Richard with a grave face, "Mr. Wilson, your family's fortune is completely depleted. It is beyond mortal intervention. My skills are too limited. I must take my leave." Without taking a single penny, he turned and left, as if staying another second would infect him with bad luck. Richard's last hope was shattered. He collapsed to the floor, looking as if he'd aged 20 years overnight. They understood. The person who tied the bell must be the one to untie it. The root of all their problems was me. That night, as I was in my room polishing the rosewood box Grandma had left me, there was a knock on the door. I didn't answer. The door opened and Richard, Helen, and Brandon walked in. Then as I watched, they all knelt down in unison. This time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of complete despair and repentance. Richard, the man who led a business empire and had never bowed his head to anyone in his life, was at the front. His knees hit the floor, and his forehead struck the cold ground with a heavy thud. Lily. His voice was so hoarse it was almost unrecognizable, thick with emotion. I was wrong, we were all wrong. He looked up, his once authoritative face now streaked with tears. We shouldn't have denied you, we shouldn't have been biased, and we shouldn't have failed your grandmother's dying wish. He choked back a sob and pushed a thick manila folder in front of me with trembling hands. These are all of the Wilson family's assets, the real estate, company stock, all cash, everything has been transferred to your name. From this day forward, you are the true head of this family. Helen knelt beside him, already sobbing uncontrollably. She didn't dare look at me, just kept slapping her own face with sharp, cracking sounds. I was blind. I'm so sorry, Lily. Hit me, curse me, do whatever you want, I'm begging you. Brandon had changed the most. He knelt at the back, his head bowed, his body trembling like a leaf in an autumn wind. He didn't dare speak, just kept kowtowing, his forehead quickly turning red and swollen. I looked at this scene of belated repentance, my heart as still as a calm lake. A little late for regrets, the old fox snorted. Don't go soft, kiddo. Make them pay for those 20 years. I put down the soft cloth, stood up, and looked down on them. I can restore the Wilson family's fortune. My voice was quiet, but it made the three kneeling figures jolt as if they had grasped a final lifeline. A look of disbelief flashed in their eyes. Richard looked up excitedly. Lily, you're willing to help us? But I have 3 conditions. I cut him off, my tone devoid of any warmth. Never mind 3, we'd agree to 300. Richard declared eagerly. I held up one finger. First, send Celeste back to her biological parents. Hold a press conference to clarify the truth to the public and restore my status as the young lady of the Wilson family. As for the suffering she is enduring now, that is the fruit of her own actions. I will not intervene, and you are forbidden from ever helping her again. At the mention of Celeste's name, Helen's body trembled, and a look of conflict crossed her face. But under Richard's stern gaze, she nodded heavily. Okay, we agree. I held up a second finger. Second, the 3 of you will go to Grandma's grave, kneel for 3 days, and beg for her forgiveness. First, for your lack of filial piety. Second, for betraying her last wishes. And third, for neglecting me for 20 years. This condition made their faces turn pale. Kneeling at a grave for 3 days, for people of their status, was not just physical torment but a public humiliation. But they didn't hesitate. We'll do it, Richard said through gritted teeth. I looked at them and slowly held up a third finger. Third, from now on, in the main hall of the Wilson estate, all of your ancestral tablets will be removed. Only the tablet of my guardian spirit, the great fox spirit, will be enshrined. You will light 3 sticks of incense and bow to it every morning and evening with reverence, without fail. This condition left them utterly stunned. To enshrine a spirit tablet meant they would completely submit to a power they once scorned. It meant the master of this house would no longer be the Wilson ancestors, but the spirit who stood with me. Richard's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but when he met my calm, unwavering eyes, he swallowed his words. He knew he had no room to bargain. Fine, he said, lowering his proud head, his voice filled with defeat. We agree to everything. I looked at them and finished my statement. Remember, I am saving this family to repay my grandmother's kindness and to fulfill my own karma. From now on, between you and me, there is only the relationship of a patron and a deity. There is no longer any bond of blood or family. Those words were the sharpest knife, completely severing the last, faintest illusion of warmth in their hearts. Faced with annihilation, the Wilson family acted with extreme efficiency. The very next day, Celeste was escorted out of the hospital by several bodyguards and sent directly to the remote town where her biological parents lived. I heard that her birth parents were ecstatic to receive a large compensation from the Wilsons, but showed undisguised disgust for the sudden appearance of their crippled daughter. What awaited Celeste was a lifetime of repaying the evil she had sown in that greedy, impoverished household. On the 3rd day, the Wilson group held an unprecedentedly large press conference. In front of the national media, Richard, his voice hoarse, recounted the truth of the baby swap from 20 years ago and presented the DNA test results. He deeply criticized himself and his family for their neglect and mistreatment of me, and he solemnly announced that I, Lily Wilson, would be the sole legal heir of the Wilson family, effective immediately. The news created an uproar. Dressed in a simple, plain-colored dress, I walked onto the stage, surrounded by countless flashing cameras. I hadn't prepared a speech. I just stood there calmly. A male reporter with glasses got the first question. It was sharp and condescending. Ms. Wilson, regarding the previous online rumors that you are a country charlatan who uses black magic to harm people, do you have any response? Can you really do those things? As soon as he finished, all eyes in the room were on me. I didn't look at him, but my gaze seemed to pass through him to a place far beyond. I won't comment on the truth of rumors. My voice carried clearly through the microphone to every corner of the hall. But I can see, sir, that you have a locust tree planted in the southeast corner of your yard, correct? And there's something unclean buried beneath it. Hasn't your son been crying every night recently, with a high fever that doctors can't explain? The reporter's face went deathly white. The hand holding the microphone began to tremble, his look of ridicule and disdain replaced by shock and utter disbelief. How did you know? Go home, dig up the tree, and burn what you find. Then mix cinnabar with black dog's blood, and draw a circle on the spot. It should resolve itself within 7 days, I said coolly. Also, a word of advice. As a parent, do not engage in wicked deeds. Otherwise, the consequences will fall upon your children. Without another word, I turned and walked off the stage. The entire hall was silent. The reporters all forgot to take pictures, just watched me leave with expressions one might reserve for a deity. From that day on, the rumor that the Wilson heiress is an enlightened master spread like wildfire. The Wilsons, as instructed, went to my grandmother's grave. I saw photos in the news. The 3 of them were kneeling before the headstone, their figures desolate, enduring the wind and rain. As for me, I was in the finest south-facing room of the Wilson estate, personally setting up a small shrine. There were no lavish decorations, just a clean rosewood altar. On it stood a purple sandalwood tablet, engraved with a few bold, elegant words. Altar of the Great Fox Spirit of the Northern Mountains. I lit 3 sticks of incense and placed them respectfully in the burner. The smoke curled upwards, filling the room with a clean, fragrant scent. Ah, peace and quiet at last, the old fox's voice purred lazily in my mind, tinged with satisfaction. If anyone ever dares to mess with you again, I'll be the first to shut them down. I looked out the window. The afternoon sun was perfect, casting long shadows from the trees in the courtyard. Many of the city's wealthiest and most powerful families were trying to get an audience with me through Richard, sending invitations that piled up like a small mountain. The waiting list for an appointment was rumored to be 3 months long. I smiled and took a sip of the tea Brandon had just brought me. The bonds of family may have grown as thin as water, but my path was just beginning. Whether I would become the revered Master Wilson, or a wealthy heiress playing games with the world was now entirely up to me. And as for those who had hurt me, they would spend the rest of their lives looking up at me in a mixture of regret and awe.